cloud. There we go. And so what I'm hoping to do is send out an email with a link for next month, along with, I think I can just upload the recording into our folder. And then that way it's there. So, Josh, Wayne, were you at our meeting last month? Okay. So Judith, but you weren't able to come last month, if I
Right.
remember correctly. Okay. So today what we're talking about, and this is for all of our friends who might be watching this recording, Josh had brought up a very specific question with the church that he serves, and we broaden it to look at what it looks like to expand our network beyond our congregations. That's partnering with city groups, other nonprofits, you name it, but just expanding our network beyond just local other congregations and our presbytery, and just talking about some of the advantages to that, but some of the cautions and some of the things that you have to work out. And I had used the example of my wife and I having a religious nonprofit that does receive funding from the Ohio Arts Council, and some of the things that we have to be careful of when receiving, government grants and that sort of thing. So I thought that could be a really interesting piece to walk through. Um, how many of you have had experience in the past with partnering with municipal entities or nonprofits or anything like that? Oh, Rob, looks
A
like
little bit. I
Roger's
mean,
here.
with our food pantry that we donate to, I'm um, since the new executive director came, I would say we're very. I mean, they know us and we know them, and they're within walking distance of us. And um, but partnering, I don't. I mean, I guess the specific sample I could just give is yesterday we finally had a ribbon cutting for the little food pantry that the Girl Scouts of the local one of the local middle schools put together for the times when the food pantry is closed. And so 3 or 4 or 5 staff and volunteers from the food pantry came over. Three, well, 2 elders and a church member were here representing the church, and then all of the scouts but one was able to make it. So um, I'm glad they were able to be recognized, and um, that, yeah. But I'd like to hear more about what
Okay.
others are doing. Yeah.
Roger, thanks for joining us.
Hi,
It's a
Tim.
small gathering. We're actually recording this, and I can't remember if you were with us last month.
I
But what
was, yes.
Yeah. So we're talking about, and so Josh was just sharing a little bit about this food pantry and Girl Scouts, but just talking about what it looks like to expand our networks, to do work with municipal entities, nonprofits. I think somebody else said secular groups. When we get grant funding from non-church entities, what are sort of the advantages and disadvantages in our experience with that?
Right.
Um, so yeah, just briefly, because Josh, you had asked, other people's thoughts, and I think food pantries are definitely one of those places where there's a lot of overlap, where we can work with. That's an easy overlap, I think, and that's a great way to make those connections. The way that we have done it here in New Concord is that, for example, we have a community day that's run by the Friends of New Concord. This is the second year that they've done it, and they've asked us, my wife and I have a nonprofit that's sort of adjacent to the church, to provide programming. And they were really clear that they wanted family-friendly programming, but because it's a community day with multiple partners and multiple grant sources, they wanted to make sure that it wasn't just going to be religious programming, right? So that's one of those things where the advantage is we are a partner in a community day that's being run by a wider organization. But we have to rethink about what's our purpose there, right? And I know that there are some churches and denominations that would say, well, we wouldn't do that because we only do programming that is talking about the gospel. Um, on the other hand, the way we look at it is that we are also members of this community and we have things that we can offer. And so the advantage for us is really just showing a variety of things that we can do and just, again, just showing that we're community partners along with this wider thing. So one way to connect is if there's another umbrella group putting on an event to see ways in which your church or your nonprofit can kind of plug in. I know at like the county fair here at Muskingum County, a lot of the food places are run by churches, right? So churches go in, they provide food and that sort of thing. We're providing music and storytelling is kind of what we're doing. So that's one way to connect. And of course, because of the grant we received from Ohio Arts Council, they do give money to religious groups, but they always remind us that it is public funding. So for us, we provide arts programming. So I think one way, Josh, to look at it is what are some things that your church, your community can offer that is a nice thing to offer that isn't necessarily proselytizing or sharing the gospel, but it's something that, so for us, we have connections with musicians of all types and we have connections with storytellers. So that's like one thing that we can offer and put together. Roger, I see you're kind of nodding and Wayne and Judith. I'm just wondering what your experiences are with doing this kind of thing.
I just took a class on nonprofits and structures and all that sort of thing and learned an awful lot. First of all, one of the things that churches have a tax exempt status,
Mm-hmm.
but are not required to be what they call 501(c)(3). Are you 501(c)(3) with your nonprofit?
We're partnered with a 503c. So this is a side note. This might be helpful. Our nonprofit is pretty small, but we partnered with our local community foundation, and I think most counties have these. So we have the Muskingum Community Foundation, and they do a lot of the taxes and paperwork on our behalf. When it comes to, so when we pay somebody more than $600, they are the ones that handle the I-9.
Right.
And tax, and they are tax exempt. So they actually have an account. So when people give donations, they will take care of that paperwork. So I highly recommend that if you can partner with your local county community foundation, I'm willing to bet that they have people in place to help set this stuff up. So that's the answer to your question. And it kind of, yeah. So go ahead, Wayne.
Well,
I'm sorry.
501(c)(3) is a magic word among nonprofits.
Right.
Okay, there are certain nonprofits that will only deal with other nonprofits that are 501(c). Okay, churches are not.
Right.
So those nonprofits will not deal with churches at all. Let me give you an example. This one should have been a fairly simple example. I worked for a steel company that had just built an iron ore mine in Liberia and built a town and everything else. We have a church in our presbytery that had just sponsored a school in a nearby area of Liberia. So it may, when Mr. Middles said, I'm looking for ways to donate money, I figured I would get those two together. Churches are not 501(c). He wouldn't give to us.
Right.
But when my niece has a nonprofit that helps out people with, parents of children with disabilities, they were 501(c), and it went through like that.
Yep.
So keep in mind that churches have that one disadvantage, that they are not what you consider 501(c). So that limits the number of people you can deal with. However, to your point, one of the things our church has done is we've worked with places. There's a Hannah's Home nearby us. It's a charity that deals with women who are battered and out of the house, and tries to, with small children, and tries to, get them back into the workforce and all that sort of thing. And they have events every year, and we work with them. What they do is they hand out baby bottles.
Mm-hmm.
And they ask everybody to bring the baby bottles home. And so we had a competition going on with Mentor Presbyterian to see who could fill more baby bottles and get it back to Hannah's Home. So Hannah's Home knows who we are. And for a while there, we were also working with a homeless shelter in Painesville. So those are ways you can do that. There's also up here, I know there's a lot of ministers associations that connect to just about everything. And finally, the other thing that is very active up here is Love Inc. And
Oh,
when
yeah, I've heard
when
of
you
them.
partner with them, you get all kinds of resources that you can refer people to them, and they'll see if they are good clients or not. The thing about, well, it's not Love Inc. It's Love in the Name of Christ is what it really is. And basically, these folks take referrals from churches like us, and then they do backgrounds on them to find out if these people are really sincere about what they're asking for, or whether they're just take the money and run. But after that, there's all kinds of resources on food, clothing, job training, the whole deal. And they like to partner with churches, as feeders, if you will.
Right.
And so there are those out there, but in the real world, you got to be careful, because I always thought all these numbers were nice, but when you take a class and figure out what they all mean, these things are, these designations are rather serious. For example, a church cannot endorse a candidate.
Right.
As soon as you endorse a candidate or a party, you can lose your tax exempt status. And where that really hurts is the pastor, because that means he loses his housing allowance.
Right.
And so there are things you can do as a church, and there are things you can't do. And I'm impressed with the fact that you've already done some, researched some of that and worked through it when you did your own work there.
Yeah,
So
let me just summarize.
that's all I'm going to say on the issue. It just
Yeah.
it's a good class. If anybody sees one at a local university, I took it as a Project 60 student. Any Ohio resident over 60 can take any course offered by any state institution for nothing. And I found it and I took it, and it was really fantastic. And I'm hoping I'm going to convince a whole lot more people to go into it.
Yeah, I heard just two things I want to piggyback, and then I want to see give Judith and Roger a chance to share. But like two things I want to pull out of that to get to like Josh's question. There's a number of things that nonprofits can do that churches can't. And I know of a number of churches that have created nonprofits
Right.
that are kind of adjacent, where they include community partners and members of the church, strictly for the purpose to do the kind of paperwork that you're talking about. So there's a couple of other things. So for example, just to even be you'd actually get like this credit report as a nonprofit. It's called a Bradford Dunn's number is what it's called.
Yes.
And then if you do anything with a state or national grant, there's another identification that you need. And churches have difficulty getting those kinds of things, but churches can. So Central Zanesville, in Zanesville, there's a ministry called Eastside Ministry. That's a nonprofit. What most people don't know is that actually started in the church. And then when it grew and got to the point where there were some grants that it could apply for, they developed a nonprofit called the Eastside Ministry, and now has their own building. But it's one that was started in the church and connected to the church, but the Eastside Ministry can connect to those sort of grants and tax benefits because they're not a church, but they are still connected to the church. So there's a lot of crossover. The other thing that I'll just, I don't know Detroit as well, but I do know that, again, if you have a nonprofit or a group and connect with a local foundation, I think they're all named Community Foundation usually, and just up a meeting with them, they usually have all sorts of cool ways to help you with that financial piece. Or if you need another underwriter or a fiscal agent, they're really good with that. I'm going to go, Roger, I think you had your hand up, and then we'll go to Judith.
Yeah, we've in the past couple years branched out and interacted with quite a few different agencies. Most of it's been through our what we call our door ministry that we run here. We have a separate area in the church designated. It actually used to be our preschool, but now we've repurposed the room because it had a separate entrance. We open it on Tuesday and Thursday mornings for 2 hours, and residents, if they have a Maslin address, they can come in and get a $15 gas card or a $15 food card along with either a bag of groceries or household items. And then we do a little counseling session with each person that comes in with the pastor or a pastoral resource that we have a little room. We can pull them aside and have a conversation with them and pray with them if they like, and try to do a little bit of just general pastoral counseling with them. But through that, we have sought out some grant money to support that, and our local Rotary has been pretty generous with us, which was a good source. They had a foundation of their own, or some dollars set aside for purposes like this, and they've been supporting us. We did one place where we ran into a little bit of a hitch was we went through the city for a block grant, and we were going down the road and they kept telling us, yeah, you're going to get it. You're going to get it. Well, then right at the last minute, they sort of pulled the plug on it and said, well, we can't give it to churches. But then we looked on the list of who did get money, and there was a church that got, so I don't really know what happened, but that
Yeah,
one,
I think you ran into a political situation,
Yeah.
Roger, is what it sounds like.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and we've sought out some grants from some other foundations as well, but it's a little, I'm not a grant writer. My wife and I have just been, she was in charge of that committee that was running that ministry, the outreach. And so we just sort of plowed ahead with it and were able to get some funds. But through that, I guess we've connected with the Goodwill Agency in this area, Habitat for Humanity, and both of those agencies, we can refer people to them for their
Right.
services. They have employment specialists, and Habitat offers, they have a store here where they sell markdown
Yes.
furniture and appliances and things for people in need. So we've developed some good relationships through that ministry. And we've also, one other thing that we've done is because of, I'm not exactly sure it was through this ministry, but we got connected with the mayor and the administration of the city. And we did partner with them over the past couple of years to sort of share. We came up with a schedule of offering either a warming center or a cooling station, depending on temperatures. And so we agreed to be open on, let's say, Mondays and Wednesdays, and the city had a location that was on other days of the week so that we could try to cover all days. So we were able to partner with them, and they worked with us to do that. We've made a commitment to try to use our building here in support of the community in general.
Yeah.
So if community people come to us and want to use the building, we have a local theater group that rehearses in our basement once a week, and things like that go on as well. So we have tried to reach out to our community and do some things like that. So
Yeah, there's two things I want to just sort of highlight that you shared, Roger. So one is another organization that I had forgotten about. That's a great one to connect with, is Rotary. I think there's a Rotary in almost every community, and they a lot of times have their own foundations and
Right.
things like that. But the second piece that you mentioned about the heating and warming spaces, that's right. That's a great way to connect with local government in terms of in emergency situations that your building could be used.
Right.
I know that when they rebuilt the church in Cambridge, we had that, well, I forget what that 2015. Anyway, we had that. They didn't call it a hurricane or a tornado. They called it a derecho or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But here in Cambridge, the building lifted up in the air and flew over into the parking lot. So the church was completely destroyed. They decided to rebuild, and when they rebuilt it, they built it specifically to be a section of it to be an emergency location where it has its own generators, it has showers, has a shelter, laundry and that sort of thing. And so they worked with the city, so the city knows that they have this space in emergency. I think that's a really cool way to think about, because then it's not proselytizing or programming, it's we have a building that could be used for emergency situations
Right.
in the community. Judith, I don't want to leave you out. I'm just curious, your experience of this
Well,
kind
one
of.
of our churches in the presbytery is right in downtown Youngstown. It's a big old beautiful big church. And at one time that was prime area, but since things have changed, the Rust Belt, you name it, the area is not as prime as it once was. But the church is determined to stay there and minister where they are. And it's provided some unique location for them because some of the agencies that deal with a lot of the people in the nearby community, it's a very convenient location. And so they house one I know of personally, a very unique ministry called Kids Grief Too, and it's an outreach to kids who are facing loss. And it's been a thriving ministry, but the founder of it needed a place to house the place. And so the Youngstown Church said, sure, you can have some space in here. And that sort of opened the door for some other agencies who needed a housing at a reasonable cost, a reasonable rate, and also gave outreach for the church to those areas. In my little community that I served, Vienna, we were a little community, and before I got there, the Catholics, the United Methodists, and the Presbyterians had gathered and formed a food pantry, which is still thriving today through the cooperation of all three. And then we also have a Hannah's House close to us, which is treatment center for drug addicted women. And we've done off and on some good things with them, done some fundraising for them. They've done some speaking for us. We've had some fun together, picnic together and that kind of thing, helping these ladies get back into a normal swing of things. And when they leave there, one of the goals of the Hannah's House is to have them church connected somewhere to help maintain the progress they've made. And so we worked with them. And the other one I thought of right away is, again, being a small community, right in our backyard of the church is where the summer concert series is.
Wow.
It's community land, but it butts up right against the church property. And so the community, people who coordinate that concert said to us, well, hey, if you want to sell hot dogs at our thing, you can use the money for mission or whatever, but we need a vendor to come in here. And so our church has done that, and not made a huge money, but we made some extra money for mission and had a chance to get our name out there. And they also have Vienna Home Days, which is an annual event, small town USA, complete with the parade and the whole 9 yards. And we've done a variety of things there, again, getting our name out there and our witness, and actually in a roundabout way, actually got a couple members that way, which wasn't our goal to go out and proselytize and get people to come to church on Sunday, but ended up with 2 new members. So there are some community opportunities out there, and I think part of it is just being present, being open to it, being available, getting known as to, we're part of this community, and we want to be part of this community.
Yeah, some of the highlights that I'm hearing. So one, that was actually one of the recommendations. I was working with the church, beautiful building with all these agencies, and I said, not only do they need space, but sometimes the agencies need office space or a phone number or any of that sort of thing. And so I know some churches have opened up their building and also receive some money so that they have a full-time administrative assistant that doesn't just serve the church, but the other agency as well. So there's always somebody during office hours. And of course, they have access to the internet. They have access to copying machines. We have a local church that does a food pantry. I know they partner with the Mid-Ohio Food Bank. So they have the only tricky part about that things is you need people in your community who are good at those kinds of administrative issues. So if you're partnering with the Mid-Ohio Food Bank, for example, there's specific paperwork and specific reporting that goes with that.
Right.
If your church doesn't have, or your faith community doesn't have people that are good at grant writing or those kinds of things, I know, Wayne, you've mentioned this, you took a class nonprofit, but a lot of times virtually every university has an office that just specializes in writing grants and also helping people write their own grants. And so
I
if there's a
just,
local university or college, they offer classes and workshops
what I'm suggesting.
specifically just writing for grants, and those are great groups. And then Judith, of course, you kind of mentioned what I said earlier or something similar, that if there's a community event run by another organization, just finding a place where you can serve, right? And for you guys, it was cooking hot dogs, right? As easy as that. And it's not like you had to go out there and preach the gospel. You were just living the gospel. And because of that, people got to know you, made connections, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we had one time at Vienna Home Days, I got wind through a member of the church that they were struggling to find a grand marshal for the parade. And I knew there was this little guy in our church who that was his pipe dream, to be the grand marshal. I mean, he always said he was the oldest man living in Vienna, and he might have been at that time. I mean, he was, and his daughter had this classic Ford convertible, so he had the whole 9 yards. He said,
Wow.
let me be the grand marshal. You can, and my daughter will, provide the car. So I just suggested that to them. I said, if you're looking for somebody, oh, that's a great idea. So he got to be the grand marshal.
Yeah, it's one of those things of like tapping, if we're the body of Christ, right? We all have unique resources or connections that we can share. So I'm the proud owner of a pretty decent Santa Claus suit, and I've done Santa Claus for the library. Most people don't know it's me. I've walked into the elementary school and walked around as Santa Claus, and so just those, and I never thought it would be a thing that I could do to serve the community, but it's just something that I had, or I'm sure you all have folks in your own congregations that have these really unique qualities. There's one of the reasons why, let me just back up. One of the reasons why my wife and I set up the nonprofit that we did was that we personally feel like that we have our own ministry that God has called us to do. And instead of trying to shoehorn everything through the church that I serve, recognizing that there's ministry that I've been called to do with the church I serve, and some that's just that God has called me. And I think that's one of the things that we can run into as pastors, where I think sometimes we feel like we have to run all of our ministries through the church that we serve, or that everyone has to funnel everything into the church. But I don't think that's true. I think there's the unique ministries of those that are gathered, and then each one of those people might have their own ministries that they should pursue. So I think churches could potentially, I hadn't thought about this before, could be a place, because when we talk about helping people discover their skills and their talents, it often is to serve the church. But what if we became a hub where members could learn how to connect their own unique ministry outside of the church, adjacent to the church, or just on their own? It's just, and then all of a sudden you start making connections that way that are really unique. Josh, you had originally asked this question in relation to whether or not, wasn't your church struggling with, you guys were being asked that you had to get a specific permit. And I think this is a good panel to talk about that.
Permit.
Yeah.
In the 90s, they had the world's Walled Lake's longest banana split, and the health department came in and said, you can't do that. You don't have a permit.
Right.
Um,
And you
and
guys were
so-
talking about possibly doing something like that again, but the permit was pretty expensive, right? Is that?
that's my understanding is that it, yeah, $1,000 or some such thing.
Yeah, so what do you guys think about that? Because I know our church is looking at doing a 5K, but as soon as you open something to the public like a 5K, then you've got to pay for police, you have to pay for event insurance, you have to, which I've done all those things before, but when a church asks for those things, sometimes there are certain roadblocks that you run into. And like Josh, I think you said that you guys were wondering, is it worth putting up the money for a permit? And would you even be able to get the permit? Like those were some of the issues.
And
Were
I
there
think
any
one
other?
of your
Yeah.
suggestions was to cooperate with another organization who already had a permit.
Hmm.
And I'm also remembering that a nonprofit around the corner from us called Words of Hope for Life um, has their annual fundraiser they've started having at the Detroit Zoo. And so maybe that's another um, because their space isn't particularly large.
Mm,
And they
hmm.
have their fundraising walk is at the zoo. Unfortunately, it's on a Sunday morning, so we're not able to participate. And my wife tells me I have to get over things happening on, both days of the weekend now that, that's just the way it is now. It wasn't
Mm.
like it was when I was growing up 30, 40 years ago, where um, events pretty much didn't start until after Sunday afternoon on Sundays.
Yeah, we did a selfish thing because we were doing a lot of our storytelling festival downtown on a Sunday afternoon. And I talked to the church about that, and they said, "Well, why don't we just do worship in the park with other churches as a community? Like, why do we have to worship here? Why can't we just fold it into where we are?" And I don't know if that helps your specific situation, Josh, but like the idea that popped in my mind was that, um, could you do could you do a worship service on the move, essentially, like instead of doing it in the church, offer a small worship service before the event, right? Because sometimes you can't do it during the event time because of other funding. But sometimes if you say, hey, we're going to participate in this as a church, let's meet either an hour or 30 minutes before the event and we can do an outdoor worship service and then participate. Like I don't know your personal church well. Like I know some churches would really kind of bulk at that, and others would say, "Hey, that sounds like a great idea." So, but that you do bring up a good point, Josh, is that there's so many more things happening on a Sunday that it gets increasingly difficult to connect. And so the question is, how do we be more creative with that or not? Um, but yeah, in your situation, that's one of the reasons why we partnered with this other group because I personally got tired of getting the insurance, the police officers, the porta potties, like all the stuff that goes around those
Yeah.
kinds of events. Find somebody else willing to do that and then find a place where you can, like, I almost wonder if you could do the world's largest banana split again as like you offered, like we would like to organize this event as a part of a bigger one. And again, you're not proselytizing or anything, right? You're just saying, as a group, as a church, we'd like to try this as a part of the event. And then hopefully this other group has already paid all the permits or at least can get that kind of cash. Because I know for some churches, putting together $1,000 is really hard, but I can tell you that business groups have no problem pulling together
No,
$1,000
not
for
for that.
something like that. So yeah, maybe you could even get a sponsor. You know what I mean? Businesses are a little dicey right now, from our personal experience with the 5K, and we have somebody on our session that works with a local LifeWise group. There are quite a few businesses that are very hesitant about partnering with a church um, or sponsoring, but I think Roger, you were the one that had mentioned Rotary. There's still some nonprofits. Lions,
Yes.
if you have a Lions Club near you, sometimes they have ways of helping and a little bit more flexibility because they're sort of like what I call religious adjacent. They're technically a nonprofit, but then they have no problem working with local churches. I'm sorry, I had a big thump, but I think it was just wind.
A
Another
couple
thing
of
we
follow-ups. First of all, when it comes
So we'll
to
go
grant
Wayne and then
writing,
we'll go Roger. Yeah, we'll go Wayne
you know,
and then Roger. Yep.
when it comes to grant writing, I sent out some handouts about 3 weeks ago to the entire group. One of them was from a textbook on how to write a grant, and it explained all the various steps. And obviously, it's just one chapter of a 10-chapter book. But I gave you the name of the book, and it should be found just about anywhere. So if you want to check it out someplace. And the other thing I want to tell you is we have a great group within the Presbyterian Church called the Presbyterian Foundation.
Yeah, right.
And
Thank you
they
for doing
are
that.
fabulous and they're free. So if you haven't worked with them, I suggest maybe you find out what they do and maybe give them a call because it costs nothing.
Yeah,
And they're real easy to work with.
the Presbyterian Foundation, for example, helped us. I think it was them. Yeah, it was Presbyterian Foundation. They helped set us up with receiving online donations to the church. Very cheap. There's still a little fee that has to be paid, but it's a lot less than some of the other organizations that are out
Yes.
there. And they totally set it up and set it up in a way, and they'll even send somebody to you to talk face to face to say, thank you for bringing that up because yes, our own denomination does have excellent resources. And I think we know Board of Pension well. We know PILP a little bit, but the Presbyterian Foundation also has funds that can set up all sorts of really interesting things to help. Roger, I think you were next up. But yeah, Wayne, thanks for reminding us that yes, we have a denomination that has some really great things.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is we've had success working with the local schools as well. Surprisingly, there was a gal that was in the school, and I don't know how she was funded through United Way or something, but she was working with at-risk families in the schools that needed support. And so we were able to partner with them and take on, almost adopt 5 or 6 families and be able to supply groceries to them every month and just try to form a relationship with them as a church, not really proselytizing, but yet just saying, hey, we're here to help you. And we know you're struggling. You have some young kids in the household. And the other thing that is going on that we're getting involved in, or I personally am, is there's a mentoring project called Legacy Project that is operating in a lot of the local schools in Stark County here. And so I went yesterday, and so I'm going to do some mentoring in the schools with 4th grade boys. And so that's just another way. I don't know if you all have anything like that in your area, but it's another way to get out there and make a connection with some community-based organizations that is a
I know schools are almost always looking for after-school programming. And you can offer all sorts of stuff. And if it's after school hours, it doesn't matter whether you're a church or not. So the way LifeWise operates, for example, is that they offer religious education during the school year, but the kids have to leave the campus to do that. So similar to, if you have Catholic classes or Jewish class, cities have done this sort of thing, but you can always do after school programming. So I've been a part of homework help as a church. We have like a local organization, so I've done programming for them. Sometimes they'll say, hey, could somebody do crafts once a week for the next 4 weeks? But that's a great place because I have found the only hard part with the schools, in my opinion, is that they are not very good at last minute stuff, right? They set their calendar about a year in advance, and sometimes trying something new with their calendar, you might run into a principal that says, hey, let's try it anyway, and others that say, well, we got it, the calendar's already set. Right, we can't do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're doing any kind of after school programming, as long as it's after the school hours or off campus, there's a lot there's a lot of cool things that you can do. And as you said, so one of the things that our church does is that, so my son's in marching band. And so if you know anything about marching band, it's pretty consuming. And it's an active one. They do competition about every other Saturday. But on Friday night, instead of having the kids go home and come back, the parents all get together to feed the kids. They call it Friday night fights. Around 3 o'clock, the kids get like a home cooked meal, volunteers, that sort of thing. Our church takes one of those Friday nights. We go in and we're the, you know what I mean? So there's all those kinds of opportunities too.
Right.
And I think you're right, Roger. If you can get involved with a local school district, then all of a sudden you get tapped into a whole other calendar of things where they might need help or just get some ideas. There are restrictions, obviously, when you work with a school, especially during school hours, but there's a lot of things you can do in the building. So for example, we do our minister association, we do sunrise service all together and we rotate who leads Sunday service. We host that at the local intermediate school, mostly because they have the gym, but if you go outside, there's a nice parking lot that faces the sunrise. Again, after school hours, not a problem. Somebody gives you a key, they let you use it as long as you clean up when you're done. So that's another great partner for a lot of these things.
Yeah, in Vienna, we had the local school, the teacher in charge of being the sponsor for the National Honor Society was looking for places where kids could serve because they had so many service
Right.
hours they needed.
Service hours.
And so she contacted us and I said, well, we're an older congregation. And I said, this may seem like a strange request, but getting the Christmas tree up in the sanctuary and doing some of the upper level decorating is getting more of a challenge. She said, oh, our kids would love that. Our kids would love to do that. So Sunday comes, in this group, about 6 kids show up for church, which just sort of bowled everybody over to see 6 kids come into church together. And they came for worship, which they didn't have to, but they wanted to be part of it. And then they stayed afterwards and they got our tree up and they did the decorating. And then we had pizza for them. We sat down and had pizza together with the kids. Well, that became an ongoing thing now. We're one of the service areas for the National Honor Society, and they've done yard work, they've done you name it. But there's been a great interchange between our older congregation and young kids.
The service hours thing is a great connection. It's actually there's 2 things we're attempting this year. One is definitely happening. Again, sometimes it just connects with personal connections, but there's a sociology professor who does a lot of like local for her research methods class where they do data entry and that sort of thing. And she's done stuff with cemeteries. She reached out to us, and we have college students that will be looking through and digitizing all of our membership records as far back as they'll go. And then they'll come back to do interviews. And so this becomes a really unique place where you've got a class that needs to work with a particular population and then a lot of times church communities can become those sort of places where you're welcoming college students in to be a part of that. The other thing that we're trying to do this year, this is what I've been working on. I'll let you know if it works or not. I don't know. So because I have my son is a senior this year, but I still get the calendar, right? The school calendar already set. I already know which days are days off for professional staff days, all that sort of thing. It's all spelled out. And those days for parents is always like, what do I do with my kid on this day, that day? So we're trying to work with education students who might have an interest in, because I think there's a program at Muskingum of students, religious students who are also education students. And we're trying to set up programming that we can send out first with our VBS families to get it started, where we say, hey, we already know these are the dates that are off. We're going to be doing like a 2 or 3 hour day in which you can bring your kids here for some kind of like, I don't want to call it VBS, but it's basically like a VBS thing, only smaller, but on those specific dates when the school district is closed. We could do it, but I don't want to do it. I really want to partner with students who need to get those teaching hours, who need to get those kinds of experiences, because I think that's good for them too. I'll let you know if it works out. I've been calling, and we just got a new provost. So I just found out, for example, the one person who's a dear friend of mine just found out that she is still kind of in charge of international studies, but now the provost is in charge of international studies, and she doesn't know what that means. So I don't know who to talk to anymore. That's part of the issue. I used to be Kelly Coffee. Apparently, it's not Kelly Coffee anymore. So now I got to figure out who that is. But if you have, I haven't been successful, but I'm hope somebody will correct the code at some point, because I think BBS, I think in any kind of children's programming where you may not have the people, but you've got education majors who need hours and experience, I really think there's a cool connection there. I just haven't quite found a program where that works, but I think that could be really cool. Especially if they're trying to do, again, just a place where they need kids to come in, right? And you can host that, and then they kind of come in too. I think that could be, I think there's something special there. Just haven't quite, I think part of it is that they have a lot of restrictions of what counts as educational hours towards their, and so just seeing how we can, if we meet the requirements that they're looking for, kind of thing. Or is it something that becomes an independent study for the student, or something like that? Because it's like, what can we do to help the students as well? You know what I mean? Like we don't want to just receive everything. We want to have this as sort of mutual. We're coming close to the end of our time, and I hope that when people, I'll share this recording once I figure out how to do that later this afternoon or tomorrow morning. Actually, I've got a staff meeting tomorrow, so I'll just ask them at the staff meeting what's the best way to share this. I'm hoping that there's enough ideas here to generate where people can start thinking about different ways to connect, different ways to expand our network. But I'm grateful that we also included the Presbyterian Foundation, because we have some really cool resources within our own denomination too to do this. I think as a denomination, ours is pretty pro connecting with agencies outside of the church. Definitely, I think generally we are pretty community-minded denomination, and that sort of thing. So does anyone have one final thing they'd like to share before we close up? Yeah, go ahead, Wayne.
Real quick, one of the areas that we as churches underutilize is the courts. Our church already has 2 people assigned to us that have to do community service.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
And so they give us a note every week, and we got to, we've used them to do yard work. They help out with the thrift store, and they're 2 of the hardest workers we have.
Yeah, I
And
forgot about that as a connection, because we're talking municipal aid, but judicial systems are actually not bad places to make connections and see what are some ways to partner. That's a great, yeah, thank you for that, Wayne, because yeah, because they have required hours they have to do, and that sort of thing. And that can be a really good piece, connecting with judicial systems. I forgot about that one. That's a good one. Anyone else?
Well, one thing we do with our special needs ministry, that got started back in 2017 and is still going strong. Our school district has an adult transitions program for those with autism, Down syndrome, special needs, where they're in school until they're 26 years old, and then they age out.
Right.
So, one of my clerk of session substitute teaches in those classrooms, and so she knew the teachers, and that was ended up being our in to start. She realized that there was a gap in these kids' social lives, And so we have once a month, we have social activities on Saturday afternoons here at the church. And parents come, the teachers come and help out. But the idea is really the parents can drop off and have a couple hours of respite,
Hmm.
well, and do what they need to do and know that their child is safe, doing something worthwhile, whether it's a craft project or a bowling outing or a trip to a local museum, um, or just games. And um, we're going to have our welcome back picnic this Saturday. So yeah, the schools is a tricky situation because sometimes it works and sometimes it
Right,
doesn't. The
right.
the assistant superintendent said they can't work with us, but if you know an individual teacher, maybe that teacher can
Hmm.
open some doors.
Yeah, well, and I like how you said, Josh, that you guys, this is paying attention to your community and getting to know your community, right? You were able to identify through your clerk of session a gap of a service that's offered, but there's a gap that you guys were able to step in and fill. And I think that's a really key piece, I think, of what we're trying to say too, is, you kind of have to get out of the church bubble a little bit. You have to really know the community. You have to start, you know, as a pastor, I know our schedules get really busy, but man, if we can, because I've been to a couple Rotary meetings, I've been to a couple Lions Club meetings, and there's some interesting connections you can learn there. And it's just saying, um, yeah, you have to, it fills up your schedule, but it's very much worth it, in my opinion, as a pastor, to say, okay, I'm a community member too. It's not just about sending the congregation out, but where are some tables where I can sit, and get to know some things and make some connections that way, because God has all sorts of interesting ways of saying, oh, because this person and that person, next thing you know, you're making those kinds of connections. So yeah, identifying those gaps. And you talked about respite, foster care is another one. Foster care agencies always look for places of, is it respite? Is that what they call it? There's a specific term that they use to give parents sort of a break.
I think so.
Yeah. Because what they'll do is, first there's the grandparent that they'll look at, or aunts and uncles, but I think sometimes churches can agree to do those kinds of things as well. And that's a great service. Well, I want to thank everyone for popping in. I know it was a smaller group, but I feel like, I don't know, I feel like we covered a lot of ground and shared a lot of good information, and my head is spinning with all sorts of different ideas.
Absolutely.
So I have a question. So we've traditionally set up our question for the next month based on, is there one theme or something you'd love to talk about next month? Or a question that you're like, hey, what can we talk about this? Because Josh, you were sort of the instigator for this one. So, which is great. It's a great topic, I think. It's really cool. What should our next topic be that I can share with everybody? So would it be too weird to do, I don't know how to phrase this. So on the national level, PCUSA level, they are re-examining ordination standards and training of ministers in word and sacrament. And guess where commission pastors are on that docket? They're not.
Well, the overture
Could
got
be
tabled.
because we
Right. We have one overture that was tabled, and that's
sent to
it.
the ordinate. We sent it. I was on the ordination committee
You
at General
were.
Assembly, and we sent the overture that for commission pastors got voted down in committee, but then got sent to the task force on the theology and practice of ordination,
Right.
which um, which felt it was their purview. It was within their purview to work on that. And there is a commission pastor from Ohio, Lance
Yeah, Lance is
Wiseman,
on that. He's with
who is
Maumee
on that
Valley.
task force. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to let you know, if you don't know what the motion is, it's essentially that currently, once you are no longer commissioned, you're not technically supposed to be serving, right? And so our presbytery, for example, and a few others, we have the chaplaincy so that if you're in between, you can be commissioned so that you can do the sacraments, even though you're not commissioned to a church. This motion was that once you're a commissioned pastor, that you can still continue to do the sacraments in between commissionings. That's the whole motion. But since we've got a committee there, I'm wondering if it would be worthwhile or not, I'm just throwing the idea out there, for us to sort of examine what are some things in our commission pastor training that we found really helpful and useful? What are some things that we wish we had? What are some things that we feel like were not very helpful? I don't know if that's a topic we want to tackle, but it is always neat to hear how a variety of presbyteries approach training and that sort of thing. So that's one idea, but I don't want to create all the ideas. I'm just making sure. Are there anything else out there, or if you think that's an interesting topic for next month?
It's interesting to me, Tim, but how does it get affected? Because each presbytery is sort of in charge, right, of building their own program. Is there any
Yeah,
standardization across presbyteries or?
well, that's my job. That's what I'm
That's
working
one of
on.
his
Okay,
responsibilities.
Yeah.
okay, all
And
right.
in
Well, then
fact,
it's not,
part
it
of my
probably would
meeting,
be
but so
a
I
good
didn't want,
topic.
but the
Yeah.
reason why I was hesitant to share it
Mhm.
is that I didn't want this gathering to be just, I didn't want, I wanted this gathering to be what it is, simply a gathering of commission pastors around the synod, looking for support, ideas, resources. I didn't want to turn it into help me do my job, right? That's because I felt like that would be selfish. But I think it is good, and I don't want it to turn into just a complaint session. You know what I mean? Where we just, I really want to think about um, maybe we should change it because maybe it should be training for the future. Maybe that's a better one. Like, so what are some, instead of reflecting back on the training and how to do it, maybe it's what are some things that future pastors, whether commission pastor or minister, we'll just say pastors, like, do we need to start training on social media?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, that's not something that's a training that we offer, but holy moly, if you're not doing something, where are the resources for that? So okay, what do you think about this? Training for the future or um, continued education opportunities, something like that, where it's like instead of trying to critique the training that we've have or been through,
Right.
it's more about, hey, we've been trained. What are some other things that we could really benefit from? Does that make sense? That way
Yeah.
it's more future. Many of us have served a good amount of time or been connected to a church to say, hey, for the church of the future, these are the kinds of things that way, even if it doesn't end up in a commissioned pastor training, maybe these are things that we can bring to our presbytery and say, hey, maybe as a presbytery we could offer, or maybe there's some people we can identify that would be really good at these kinds of workshops
Yeah.
of just any pastor serving, regardless of being commissioned pastor, minister, or sacrament, could benefit from it. That could be interesting.
Yeah.
Just kind of coming up with a list of these are the kinds of trainings.
Yes.
Like right away, I can think social media is one. Addiction and recovery. Holy
Hmm.
moly, there's so
Could
much
spend a
going on.
month on each topic. You
Yeah,
could
you
spend
really could.
one
You
month
really
on
could.
social media and another month on something else.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's 1,000 others that I'm not thinking of that would be really cool to meet and say, hey, what are some of those things that a pastor moving forward really needs some training in? And that sort of thing. So If you don't mind, I think that would be a good one. I just didn't want it to
Sounds
be
good.
like, let's complain about whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's think forward thinking of
Right.
what are some areas. I could see grant writing as a part of that. I could see, man, there's just a ton. There's just a ton.
Right. Why don't you have us send us, each of us send you a list and see what commonalities there are. So that way it'd be
Yeah.
easy for you.
I can send out an email. So let me write this down. I'm going to meet with, I won't send it out right away because I have that staff meeting at 2, because I want to also say, hey, can we set up, I think we're getting ready to set up a page for commission. I just had that conversation before I left for Scotland so that we can find the link easy enough for the meeting and calendar and all that sort of thing. That way, when I send out the email, it has all these different pieces and then future trainings. And I like the idea of people kind of responding to that and just seeing if there's some key ones. Because my experience has been sometimes you put stuff out there that you need and God already has somebody in place that can do it. You know what I mean? We have some really talented, like just looking at our commission pastors, almost every commission pastor I've met has had another life, maybe 3. Right? And they can bring these past experiences forward and say, hey, I had experience doing this. It might be one of those things where even if we can't do it in our presbyteries, maybe we can host, instead of doing it during the brown bag, maybe we can host an additional Zoom where somebody within our group says, hey, I'd like to do a workshop on, I have experience with, you know, that sort of thing. That could be really fun. I could see that really kind of being a neat thing. Okay,
And
well,
Tim,
thank
I
you,
just want to
everyone.
lift
Yeah,
up.
go ahead, Josh.
I just want to lift up to everyone, and you can send this out whenever you send stuff out. WeKirk at Montreat is happening
WeKirk.
October 20th to 23rd at Montreat, North Carolina. I went last year for the first time. I can't recommend it highly enough. And if you're an elder or a commissioned pastor of a church with under 100 members, the registration is only $200.
That's really good.
You for 2 nights, 3 days, or 3 nights, extra $50 or $75 for the third night. If you're signing up for the track that starts Sunday night, but most people, the track starts Monday morning and goes till Wednesday noon.
The only reason why I'm smirking is that if you look at any presbytery, members of 100 or less, I think that's 3/4 of the presbytery.
Oh,
No,
nationwide.
you know what I mean? Like, I think WeKirk, you know, I think that's most of us. I know we had to change, as state clerk, we had to change our bylaws because we had something in there that was like, if you have 500 members or more, you can have 2 commissioners, right? We only have one church that even hits that. And I'm like, you know, I think we need to rethink about what we consider a large church within our presbytery. So we kind of came up and redid it. I think now it's set at like 120 members, which is more appropriate to say, okay, it doesn't mean we have a lot more churches like that. But when you said that, Josh, I'm like, boy, I think that's about 3/4 of the churches in our presbytery that are available for WeKirk. I think that's a great idea to put that out there. Because I've heard a lot of good things about WeKirk as well. I think that's a good one. Thank you, Josh. Well, thank you, everyone. Look forward to chatting with you all again real soon.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You know.
Take care.